Hello, everybody, and welcome to this reading of my latest book, The Copper Gates. My name is Lars Cederholm, and you can find out more about me on my webpage. I don't want to make any money from reading this book, but you can donate to a monastery in India that we are working with orphans, and perhaps you will be inspired to send in a little contribution to them, and you will also find the address on this page that you're looking at now. The Copper Gates is a science fiction book that will take you into the vast realm of the mind for a discovery of things that you may not have thought about or visited before. I hope when you come back from the trip into the Copper Gates that you will bring something with you that will be useful for yourself and others. In the second book, which is not finished yet, called Bhuvanar, you will find the protagonist from the Copper Gates and his friends in India, where they are facing a apocalypse and are brought together between different groups and castes to agree on their survival. But that book, again, is not finished and will probably be on the same media in about 3 to 4 months from now. However, now, please sit back, relax, fasten your seatbelts, and let's go through the Copper Gates together. The Copper Gates. Martin Östphal was sitting at the edge of his bed, fully awake, eyes wide open. His heart was pounding so hard that he could feel it through his whole body. He stood up and went to the bathroom and looked into the mirror. Terror was looking back at him. The same dream again. He had just been standing in front of a large, shining copper gate, so close that he had to bend backwards to see the top. An intense light poured out through the crack as the double doors were slowly opened. An assertive voice had demanded that he fix his eyes on the ground. Under no circumstances was he allowed to look straight into the blinding light. An invisible force had pulled him slowly towards the opening, and just as he was about to squeeze through the gate, he had convinced himself that some unimaginable inferno was waiting for him on the other side. That was the moment when he woke up. As he looked around the room, he noticed the sharp, metallic smell of fear that he knew so well. Again and again, the same dream, 10, maybe 15 times. Why could he not rid himself of this nightmare? What was the dream telling him? Some years earlier, Martin had been standing in front of the Copper Gates, this time in a remote village deep in the Peruvian jungle. The shaman Antonio Alvarez from the Urarina tribe had introduced him to peyote and some other traditional psychedelic herbs. Martin had known about Antonio through some friends who told him about the deep revelation of a secret world they had visited, being guided by the magic powers of Antonio and his secret plant substances. Martin had flown to Lima, and from there it took him almost 3 days to reach the jungle village where Antonio lived with his family and his tribe. The village was nested in a clearing in the dense jungle. Some 30 straw-roofed houses built with clay and plant material lined the sandy road that started in the jungle and ended up next to a slow-flowing river. Children, animals, and adults were living together in harmony. Everyone in the village, men, women, children, and animals, regarded Martin's presence with a mixture of amusement and shyness. The first 2 weeks, Antonio didn't speak directly to Martin. He just sat with him for days and nights, performing his complicated rituals. A few times he studied Martin with eyes that looked both at him and past him. The ritual became increasingly intense and lasted for days and into the nights. Antonio took great care to prepare the foul-tasting concoctions that Martin swallowed every morning, and then, one day, as Antonio went into trance, naked men and women were dancing in a slow circle outside the house to the monotone beat of drums. When the dance stopped, Antonio addressed Martin directly for the first time. He said that now that Martin was fully initiated, he was going to pass through some obstacles before he joined the wisdom of the spirit world. He was told to relax his mind and his body no matter what he was going to see before he arrived at the luminous state of mind that would reveal itself when fear had released its grip from the mind. After having said that, a new kind of dark, foul-smelling paste was given to Martin to swallow. The result was days of balancing on the sharp edges between terrifying dreams and periodic visits to a jungle paradise with birds, butterflies, sweet rivers, and laughing children. Between these experiences, Martin was fully present, observing every detail with its shadows, colors, angles, and forms. So real and yet so unreal and otherworldly, appearing as a kaleidoscope that the mind was shaking. And then it happened. In a flash, he found himself standing in front of a huge copper gate with the intense light streaming out between the two doors that made up the gate. Who was behind the stern voice giving him orders to look away from the light? What kind of reality was revealed through the foul-smelling and bitter substance that Antonio told him was sacred and could lead him into a world more truthful than the one he was living in now? Antonio had screamed to him to muster his courage to enter through the opening doors, but just as he came close to the opening, he froze, utterly unable to take that last step. Somehow Antonio had the ability to freely enter Martin's state of mind, but no assurance from him could convince Martin to go through the gates. Antonio had been guiding Martin all the way to the copper gate, as he was burning herbs and covering Martin's naked body with ashes and mud. After refusing to enter, Martin had been vomiting until nothing was left, followed by a splitting headache. In a last huge flash, Martin experienced his mind operating like a four-dimensional flipper game, and then the moment came when he saw his own physical body walking in through the door to sit down next to him, looking at him with a face that revealed nothing. That was the end of the journey. He was now convinced that he was about to lose his mind with nothing to come back to. Martin decided that he could take no more of the experience. He packed his bags, took farewell of Antonio and the village people, and went back to New York City. Before departure, Antonio had sat him down for a final talk and told him that there was more for him to do. Martin needed to understand that leaving unfinished would always be with him until he was ready to release his attachments to the superficial world that he was hanging on to for his dear life. Antonio had asked him to come back after a year of reflection, and then he wanted Martin to make a new attempt to pass through the gate. Martin kept postponing the idea to go back to Peru until the promise he made to return had faded away. But the dreams continued to remind him of how he was standing paralyzed in front of the gates. One difference was that in the dreams, the voice was no longer a male voice. It was the voice of a woman telling him to refrain from looking up as the doors opened. As a result of his work with Antonio, Martin changed his art. He started to make drawings and paintings of himself standing there in the presence of the blinding light. He even made a 4-meter-high model of the gate, covered with shining copper. In front of the gate, he made a life-size figure from mud and straw, standing on all four. He arranged for a show in his Chelsea gallery, where he projected a blinding backlight streaming out through the crack between the two doors of the gate. He was present in the gallery every day for 2 weeks, asking visitors to share their fantasies about what could possibly be found on the other side of that gate. He collected more than 50 answers, but none resonated with his fear of what was waiting for him on the other side of the gates. Some people suggested that the door was the entry to paradise. Others fantasized that the light revealed some purgatory or hell hiding there. Someone who knew Martin suggested that the light came from a fire that existed only so that Martin would be given a chance to burn his transgressions in a sacred fire. Others speculated that the gate was hiding the land of wandering and tormented souls. One person thought that the passage through the door was the gift from the universe to liberate the artist from fear and self-imposed limitations. Most of the people said that there was nothing behind the gate, only a lamp and space inside more space. No thingness. Over the years, Martin's art had become a talking piece in the art world and attracted art critics who were interestingly divided in how they understood the Coppergates, his drawings and books of poetry. The Coppergate project traveled to museums and galleries around the world, and Martin maintained his stoic silence, leaving room for endless speculations. Who is Martin Östphal? It's not easy to give a clear picture of Martin Östphal. Before the Coppergate works, he had made a name in the art world from his complex mirror sculptures and his unique paintings and drawings, which often seem to find the edge between figurative images and uncompromising abstraction. But the big artistic success came from the work based on the Coppergate dreams. This work, together with his many art books, had been published in more than 20 languages and were widely discussed in search of subliminal messages. Different groups laid claim to discoveries of far-flung messages from a secret world. Martin preferred not to talk about his art, and he rarely reacted to the different interpretations by the art critics. He never or almost never gave interviews, and when he did, the answers were confusing and sometimes he was contradicting himself. Martin didn't want to confuse his art with any references or truthful information about himself, once claiming that deception was a part of the subtle aura surrounding his work. Only a handful of people had any knowledge of his private life. Some people said that he was born in one or another of the Baltic republics. Others claimed that he had spent his childhood in either Croatia or in Serbia. When asked about his age, he would say that he was not sure, but his guess was between 30 and 40. His hair was kept braided in a ponytail, and most of the time he sported a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard. His sensual lips were sharply outlined, his eyes dark and penetrating, observing the world with his head defiantly tilted backwards. He was often described by others as a man who radiates self-confident arrogance. He was in the habit of meeting people's attempts to engage him with silence that made him famously uncomfortable to be around. Martin was constantly traveling between galleries and museums to participate in the look and feel of the exhibitions, and then he would disappear for months to places only known to himself. On these occasions, he would cancel all schedules without bothering to explain himself to anybody. It was only known to him that he spent weeks, sometimes months, obsessing about his shortcomings, his unkind judgment of the world, and cowardly acts towards others. For years he was living in New York City and in London, but only few friends sworn to secrecy knew where. Martin is the kind of person who has many fantasies and secrets that will never be known to anybody. Somebody once said about him that his aim was to slip into paradise, from where he was hoping to have a panoramic view of hell. Many years after the first Coppergate show in New York City, Martin had reluctantly accepted an invitation from Slovenia to take part in a symposium that brought artists, politicians, scientists, and business people together to discuss the relationship between the interdependent acts of creation and destruction. The point that the invited guest panels agreed on was that all life was involved in these inevitable cycles of birth and destruction. The artist had the obligation to engage in destruction with the same passion as the act of creation. By participating in the Slovenian symposium, Martin broke his legendary silence and spoke for the very first time about how he would at times burn, slash, discard, sometimes his most successful work, just to stop the babbling sound of the ego. He claimed that his act of distraction had opened the doors to new understanding and to opportunities that could not be had in any other way. Martin claimed that the process of creation and destruction could not be limited to the manifestation of the art, but the same unrelenting courage had to be part of the identity of the artist in all of us. As he was addressing the audience, he was aware that his talk had a bitter taste of dishonesty, since he never had the courage to face the uncertainty of what was hiding behind those doors. Never with Antonio, and never in his dreams. After the conclusion of the symposium, the Slovenian host suggested that Martin take some time off to experience the beauty of the Slovenian countryside. He decided to rent an open car and take a few days to drive around the handsome mountain landscape and enjoy the fresh, unpolluted Slovenian mountain air. This warm, sunny day, Martin was heading out of the Slovenian capital, Ljubljana. The road was nearly empty, and Martin, who had always been addicted to speed, found the rhythm of the winding roads, and with increasing confidence, he began to push the car to its limits and took pleasure listening to the high-pitched sound of the tires as he zipped through the hairpin turns of the paved roads. He heard the distant roaring noise of a truck on a low gear struggling to get up the mountainside. Suddenly, the entire road in front of him was filled up with a truck coming right at his speeding car. Too late to brake. There was this small opening between the truck and the mountainside. On the other side was a narrow gap between a flimsy-looking fence and a steep gorge. He made a split-second decision for his escape. Martin was looking at a gathering of people who were looking at him, men, women, and children, all with the same facial expression. Was this a dream? He had always been good at reading the psychic temperature in a room. Now his social radar was not working, and he was paralyzed, just like the moment before waking up from his nightmares. All these people looking at him had open mouths and wide, motionless eyes, reminding him of pictures of aliens from some distant planet. The faces and the erect bodies had no muscle movement and revealed nothing about what was going on. Martin felt an urge to escape, but his body would not obey his mind. Nothing moved, no wind, no sound, no voices, only the heat from the hot sun in zenith and the distinct smell of warm asphalt. The crowd silently opened a path in front of him as if somebody had carefully choreographed the movements, and Martin understood that the opening was for him to enter, knowing that something was waiting for him. Slowly, he entered the path. His body felt like it was weighed down by a rucksack full of stones. Several times he fell down on the road, and each time he was helped to his feet by the people in the crowd. His eyes were fixed to the ground to keep safe from falling. The crowd appeared like the sides of a deep gorge that became longer, deeper, and narrower with each step. Martin heard ambulance sirens in the distance, a sound that ripped a large hole in the deafening silence, and then there it was again in a flash. The Copper Gate, right in front of him, mightier than any of the dreams or the experience with Antonio in the Peruvian jungle. The intense burning white light that he remembered from the past was now replaced by a pulsating light in the colors of the rainbow pouring out from the crack between the two doors. For a brief moment, the experience of beauty washed away his fear, and he allowed himself to sink into the miracle that engulfed him. And then the voice broke the spell, and fear and anxiety was back with a vengeance. Martin, get down on all four and keep your head down. I will leave enough opening for you to come through, and once you are through, you and I will connect at the place from which I am now speaking. If, on the other hand, you decide to look up in defiance of my instruction, then you must know that this gate will be closed forever, and there is nothing you can do about that. No prayers will have the power to give you another chance to enter. If you are staying where you are now, and that is your choice, you will be picked up and simply taken away. The voice was a firm voice of a woman. Antonio had spent days with Martin, guiding him to these doors, but always in vain. Martin had never been able to convince himself to take that last step into the light. What did Antonio know that he claimed he wanted for me? Did he really love me like he made me believe, or did he secretly dislike me, setting a trap that would lead him to a burning hell? All the complex relations with Antonio was passing through his mind with amazing clarity. And then the doors opened slowly without making a sound. Martin was standing on all four, head down to the ground, struggling with a difficult choice. Stay on this side and be simply taken away, as the voice had said. Taken away to where, and by whom? Perhaps to be further tortured by bad dreams and never get to rest my mind full of broken promises, guilt, and shame. Then again, if I don't pass through, I will never know what life has been trying to tell me for all these years. I know what I have in my life, and I can stay here on this side, even if I must continue to live with the sad and painful aspects of the way it is now. And I have no idea what horror is waiting for me on the other side. Martin cried out the question into the void. What reason can you give me to cross with no idea what awaits me on the other side? Who are you speaking to me from the other side of the door? What is your reason to suggest that I pass over to the other side, and why do you want to join me there? After a long silence, the voice said, "The copper gate does not just exist in the ordinary way that you are used to in your everyday life. You ask me about the reasons to cross over to the other side. First, try to realize that the one who is on the other side is you. Now listen carefully. The choice you must consider now is whether you choose the opportunity to become fully awakened, which will be made possible by entering through the gate. The alternative you have is to stay where you are now and let you be ruled by tricksters and ghosts, bringing endless misery to your life. This is a choice only you can make, Martin. I must urge you to act quickly because I am running out of patience with you. The gate will be permanently closed in a few moments." Martin hesitated for another split second, and then he made his decision. He started to crawl towards a luminous rainbow light between the two open gates. After the doors had closed behind him with a deep rumble, the multicolored light was instantly replaced by a cold, gray, bone-chilling mist. Still walking on all four with his head down, he was met with a ferocious roar that appeared to be coming from a distance ahead. The voice came back now, sounding like it was coming from behind him. "Martin, you must know that this entrance is guarded by a ferocious animal. You're just about to be attacked, and right now you must stand up and face the beast that is coming for you. Remember to fix its eyes with your eyes and stay in place no matter what emotions are trying to get hold of you. The beast wants you to flee, and if you do, the opportunities that you are now waiting for will be lost forever. The beast may throw sand and earth to your eyes, but you must stay in place, not moving back or forward, even with the slightest movement. Provided you are strong enough to take hold of yourself, then you and I will have the good fortune to meet again. Now let me wish you good luck." Martin quickly came to his feet and noticed a dark forest towering like a wall in front of him. The ear-shattering roar coming towards him from the forest multiplied with the surrounding echo. The crackling sound of breaking twigs came closer, and then a large, furry, wolf-like creature the size of a bear came galloping towards him with burning eyes, large, sharp teeth, and a gap foaming with rage. The beast came all the way up to Martin and made ear-splitting growls that pushed out the thick, stinking saliva that splattered over his face and torso. Martin stood his ground, even though his whole being was shouting at him to turn around and flee. As he was told, he fixed his eyes on the glowing amber-colored eyes of the raging animal, and the miracle happened. The beast stopped the attack and lay down at his feet, looking at him with sleepy eyes. Martin was overcome by an inexplicable feeling of compassion for the beast, and he reached out to the large furry head and started to gently rub it as the beast closed the eyes in obvious pleasure. Liberated from his fear, Martin looked around and became aware of the mouth of a tunnel that opened at the beginning of the forest. For no obvious reason, Martin understood that he had to walk into the tunnel. The beast stood up, stretched, and slowly walked ahead of him into the tunnel, which was vibrating with sounds reminding him of large waves crashing against a beach of stones and pebbles. He walked into absolute darkness and let his hand follow the slippery sides, hoping that he wouldn't fall down into a hole or down some stairs. A strong odor let him know that the beast was walking ahead of him, and he came so close that he was able to grab its spiny tail and let the beast lead him the way further into the darkness. After what seemed like an eternity of slow walking through the tunnel, the sound faded away, the beast stopped and turned around, and Martin sensed that he had reached an end. As he groped around in the darkness, his hands identified a circular opening made from some kind of steely, polished material. His hand searched around the opening and found the same clay-like, slippery material that his hand had known walking through the tunnel. He turned around and took a few steps back, only to be met with an angry roar from the beast, letting him know that the return back through the tunnel was not an option. Martin lifted himself to the edge of the opening, sat down, and started to slide down, first using his hands and feet to slow down the fall. After a short struggle, he had to let go. At the end of a terrifying fall through twists and turns, he fell on his back on a small grassy meadow with fragrant summer flowers. He looked around in amazement to find something familiar where none could be found except the grass and the flowers. The meadow was surrounded with glossy white walls, no doors, no windows, no roof. The one thing in the room that helped him fix his mind was a perfect square of cobalt blue sky above. Martin fell asleep. He woke up to the voice instructing him to get ready to continue the journey. To where and how? He asked. No way to climb up towards the blue sky, and no opening in any of the four shiny walls. His lament was met with a long silence, and then the voice asked him to put his hand on any of the four walls and experiment with different pressures. To his amazement, his hand and half his arm sank into the white surface just when he found the right balance between action and inactivity. When he slowly pulled back his arm, the wall went back to the same surface without leaving a trace from the arm. He put his foot to the wall with the same kind of pressure, and the same thing happened. "What do you want me to do?" Martin asked the voice. "Walk through the wall and end up where?" The question again was met with silence, and Martin saw no other way other than to continue the journey. He sat down on the meadow to gather strength to walk through the wall. Having the enraged beast in memory, he couldn't help thinking that some new, horrifying surprise would be waiting for him on the other side. He forced his worries to the side, stood up, and walked into the surface with the same pace and pressure that he had used with his hand and foot, and the wall gave way. Just as his body was about to liberate to the other side of the wall, he froze, and again he experienced numbness and fear that he had come to the end, that he was about to become a permanent part of the wall. Some force on the other side was now pulling at his hands and feet, and with a sudden jerk, he found himself lying on a polished floor. The room, the size of a cathedral, had the same glossy white walls as in the space he had just left. He looked around, waking up from a dream inside of a dream. There was no clue to help him relate to anything from past experiences. The high ceiling was held up by rows of undecorated pillars. The room had 4 large doors centered on each of the 4 walls. The doors were covered by copper richly decorated with bas-relief images that Martin did not recognize from anything he had ever seen before. The floor was covered with a surface that looked like shiny pink marble. The only objects in this space was a large, richly adorned wooden table with 4 chairs arranged in a row. A 5th chair was standing on the other side of the table. "Sit down, Martin," the voice was not asking. He struggled to stand up from the floor and sat down on the chair as he was told. This must be some kind of stage, Martin was telling himself, worrying about what was going to happen next. He tried to stand up when the voice came back and firmly told him to be patient and remain seated. After a few hours of tense stillness, all 4 doors opened at the same time, and 3 women and 1 man entered the room at exactly the same time. All 4 turned around, shut and locked the doors, and marched up to the table, where they put 4 keys in a box richly adorned with precious stones. They sat down looking at Martin without revealing any feelings or purpose. 2 of the 3 women were without makeup and had natural grey hair, closely cropped. The 3rd woman had long blonde hair, cherry red lips, false eyelashes, and large earrings. Her breasts were large, and she wore a tight miniskirt that exposed the shape of her body. The man looked like he was in his 70s. His chocolate-colored face had a kind look framed by an unkempt beard. He was dressed in an elegant, colorful robe. Martin took measures of the 4 persons, one by one, and he didn't recognize any of them. As soon as everybody had sat down, the voice came back and spoke with authority. "Martin, you're invited to spend time with these 4 people. Your task is to jointly find truth in whatever way you think about what truth is. The 4 people now facing you have been instructed to put the keys in the box on the table. Those 4 keys will remain under my control for now. The rules are simple and easy to understand. There is no particular clear goal set for any of you, except you will have to be working with each other to seek the answer to what truth is, and then proceed to discover the future for all of you. You will not be able to leave the room, and you cannot use physical force to settle disagreements. You may hear from me from time to time when I decide that you need help." Nothing in the room moved. No sound, no eyelid was batted, no posture changed position, and there was no sign what was going on in the minds of these four people. Martin used the silence to examine what was going on inside of himself, and he concluded that the whole thing was some kind of a trap. Why did these people, with their unsmiling faces, look like they were there to sit in judgment? Why was he finding himself in this enormous room built to a scale obviously meant to diminish him to an insignificant proportion? Martin decided to hide behind the silence. He briefly weighed the risk of leaving the initiative to these people to set the stage for what was to come, but he decided to wait. The silence dominated the room until one of the women, who said that her name was Mary, started to speak. Mary looked directly at Martin and whispered, "Some days ago, I found myself in this place where I met these three people who, like me, were surprised to find themselves in an unknown place without any kind of explanation. We were told to sit in silence in a room without windows and wait for days and night. When we were ordered to go and stand facing each one of these four doors, the voice told us to open the doors and enter this room and put the door keys to this jeweled box. Just before entering the doors, the voice announced that a person with the name Martin would be waiting for us, and we were told that this man would be of some help to us. I'm not sure why I have this urge, but now that you have come to help, there is something that I must speak about, because it dominates every fiber of my body, and I now feel that I have nothing to lose. Until now, most of my married life can be best described as a hellish experience, and the injustice of the mental cruelty of my husband became too much for me to handle. For generations, my own family has made married life to be the cornerstone for family and happiness. The stories we shared were mostly about the warmth and joy of husbands and wives, families and neighbors. That was how we kept our families together. There was no other way for me to be family, and I struggled to bring my husband and me back to the love we felt for each other when we first met. It became my personal quest to retrieve the sacred union that had slipped away from me. All I got back from my husband was him staring at me. Once in a while, his face radiated disgust for me. Every so often, he would mumble some insulting words to give further power to what his face was already telling me. One day, he stopped talking to me at all. A few weeks after the deep silence took over our home, I prepared a candlelight dinner for him, and then I turned on the gas in the oven and put my head inside, waiting for death to come and take me out of my misery. The only thing that made me hesitate was the fear that I would wake up in hell. But truth be told, I was already in hell, and nothing could be worse than the life I was living. That day, my sister Kirsten had made an unannounced visit and found me lifeless on the kitchen floor. Kirsten managed to pull me out from the house and laid me down on the grass outside, where neighbors gathered and took turns to try to restart my heart and fill my lungs with air. During this chaotic rescue effort, I heard somebody say that it was too late, that life had left me, and that there was nothing that anybody could do about it. Kirsten was screaming, and I heard my husband's voice observing that I was beyond rescue. Ambulance sirens could be heard approaching from a distance, and the last thing I remember was hearing a mighty rumble that sounded like some large piece of earth falling into water. Until this moment, Mary had directed her voice to no one in particular, but now she picked up her chair and sat down facing Martin while observing him with dark eyes. She lowered her voice and she told him that everything about him, his withholding silence, his way of pulling his head backwards in a signal of arrogant defiance, his curled lips, and his superior gaze, all taken together, Martin reminded her of her husband. She said that she was hoping that a person like Martin would be able to explain what was behind the wall that her husband had set up between them. Mary, who had never in her life talked to anybody the way she was talking to Martin now, was sobbing and stuttering uncontrollably. "I am sorry, but I don't understand anything of the misfortune of my adult life, and I need help to explain my failed marriage, and I must be given an explanation of how I ended up in this room." Mary was speaking to Martin as if they had known each other from before. Absolutely nothing in her appearance or the tone of her voice reminded him of anyone he had ever known. He started to look at the doors and the box of keys, thinking about making his escape without further incidents. He had stopped listening to her, just looking for ways to escape the pain of becoming innocently mixed up in Mary's sad and unfortunate life. She stopped talking and was clearly waiting for some kind of response from Martin, who remained silent, protecting his thoughts, and then out of nowhere it came to him. Why did Mary's story about her husband sound so familiar? He scratched around in his memory, and the face of a woman appeared in his mind's eye, sharply outlined, looking straight at him with the same mix of anger, despair, sadness, and hope as he had just seen in Mary's eyes. He recognized the woman as Elise, with whom he had shared a bed for many years. The relationship with Elise had ended badly, and she had invented a story about him that made him out to be a monster, capable of psychological torture and even physical violence. She had brought a court case against him and had even convinced some friends to appear in the court. They lied under oath to the judge, claiming that they had been witnessing to how Martin had pushed Elise into a wall with such force that she had lost consciousness and had to be taken to bed for several days to regain her footing. Martin had to appear in court to defend himself from all these unfounded accusations of violence and cruelty. The whole thing had ended up with Martin paying a substantial sum of money to Elise just to make her leave him alone. He never met her again after the case was settled, and he had managed to expel her from his mind, and now she came back to stir up the bad memories and torture his mind. Now Elise had come back to him in the form of Mary, and the painful trial was being opened one more time. This situation is a good example of what hell must be like, Martin mumbled to himself, trying to grasp the bizarre meeting between himself, Mary, and the ghost of Elise. Martin remained silent as Mary was waiting for him to talk to her. One of the other women used the silence and introduced herself as Venus. Her voice sounded like that of a young boy in the beginning of puberty. Her eyes moved from person to person as she spoke. "Mary, let me say something about myself and then come back to you. Finding myself in this place is so otherworldly that I don't even know where to begin. All I remember before coming here is a noisy rave party where sweaty people were dancing with each other without any kind of inhibitions. At the peak of joy and sensual abandonment, an ear-splitting explosion filled everything, and when I managed to stand up, the room was completely silent in chaotic, smoky slow motion. As I regained some of my hearing, I was aware of the sounds of crying and lament from disfigured people. Many were dead and dying. I was half naked, and my body was covered with blood from myself and others. I somehow managed to get out to the street, and there I fell down among people screaming in pain and shock. The two words that I heard over and over were God and Mother. Some people in white coats took me away on a stretcher. The next thing I know was sitting in silence together with the other 3 people here, and then I'm standing in front of one of the doors to this room with a key in my hand. I want you all to know that Mary is not the only one in this room who has suffered from hard and unjust life. I am a woman who has suffered the strangeness of being incarcerated in the body of a man. That man's name is Simon, and he's still living inside of me. For years, I've been waging war against Simon, commanding him to leave me in peace, but he is forever stubborn and refuses to exit. Venus spoke fast, as if she was afraid that she would be interrupted. She took a deep breath and she continued. I keep searching for him, but I'm not able to find the place where he is hiding. Is he part of my body, my cell structures, my DNA, or is he a ghost that has found hiding places in my mind where he exists under clever cover? Lately, I have made a real attempt to speak to him in a softer way, asking him to leave me alone. My hope is that I will come to realize that Simon is an illusion. But the tragic truth is that I am possessed by doubt that I, Venus, will never become the woman of my dreams. Mary started to speak to Martin again. Now that I have made my personal suffering known, I would like to turn back to Martin and Mary, who seem to be connected in some way that is not obvious to me or to them. Martin, you must help Mary to explain how you understand the reasons for the collapse of the marriage and of her life. She obviously can see something in your presence that gives her hope to understand the deeper reason for her misery, and you just cannot sit here in your haughty silence and watch her suffering. I feel related to the elusive ghost that is plaguing Mary, since I too find myself tortured in trying to understand the epic tension between Venus and Simon. Martin, help Mary to explain her misery and how her marriage became a living hell. You can help her, and I'm saying that without understanding why. One more thing. I must ask you, Martin, do you remember me? Venus was crying, her mascara running down her face. Martin was gathering his thoughts after Venus' question and Mary's hope for help. Who was it that Venus asked him to remember? The elusive Simon or Venus, the female emanation in search of the pure woman? He realized that he had to break his silent withdrawal and say something, and he spoke to Mary first. Mary, it saddens me to hear what you've done to yourself. You're asking for my help, so let me speak openly about my impressions from listening to you. You seem to be looking at yourself as a victim whose happiness rests mainly on your life as a married woman in a happy home. It is amazing that you have stubbornly pledged loyalty to a sphinx husband who has been punishing you with his silence. Are you really so powerless, Mary, that you had to take your own life as the only way out of your misery? You are asking me why your husband decided to retreat into silence and what he was hiding from you, now that I remind you of your husband. Mary, please, I must ask you to take back the anger I see in your eyes when you look at me. You experience your husband in how I appear to you. Let me tell you something about my silence and what is behind it. The voice said that we have come here to find truth, and I will tell you my truth. I'm choosing silence because I do not want to say anything that will bring a difficult situation into more difficulty. Another reason is that I'm using my silence to cover up for my cowardice to speak my truth, and there are times when I'm ashamed to keep to myself what should have been said. But most of all, I choose to remain aloof and silent because people make up stories of what is on my mind, and that gives me the power over others. Keeping my silence has resulted in more and more people talking about my art and me, and there it is. Different views are debated, and there is no end to it all. Without me as a voice in the debate, there can be no closure because I'm arrogant enough to let my silence manipulate the art world as I know it. As I listen to the debate from the sidelines, I can look at my art and my life from so many points of view. I have told myself that people find dimensions of themselves where no explanations are given, and in this way, my silence can be used to reveal the vibrations in the art and the promise of healing. Mary, there are myriads of reasons for silence, too many for any one person to understand. Perhaps your husband kept silence to protect you from knowing his low opinion of you. He knew that his silence became your obsession, and he gained total power over you. Let me tell you that I have also wronged women in my life by suddenly withdrawing from the promise to worship them. Now that I think back on these relationships, I'm sorry to admit that it happened more than once in my life. Can it be that you can sense these betrayals just by being in my presence? Your desperate act of becoming no one and nothing left him with a gruesome victory. Sorry, Mary, but I'm not able to help you, even if I want to, because I'm not your husband, and I can only talk about what could be possible as an explanation for your grief and your confusion. Is it possible that you have come here to realize how you have been participating in your own tragedy? Mary looked at Martin with tears in her eyes, stuttering that she had been giving up her life in small pieces until there was nothing left of her. Nothing worthy of love and joy, nothing to look forward to except a hopeless dream of what her married life in a safe home could have been like. Mary's contorted face was wet with tears as she whispered, "Martin, thank you for talking to me with such honesty. I still see my husband in you, but I realize how that is more about me than it is about you. I haven't asked to come to this place. I have never been here before. I don't remember reading or seeing any pictures about this strange, cavernous hall. I have never met any of you before. Am I the only one who thinks that I have come here as a part of some perverse experiment? I cannot help thinking that I have been kidnapped by aliens and sent here in a spaceship. And what about you, Martin? Who are you? Are you some kind of avatar, some perverted Christ figure who have come to lead us away and out of here?" Martin walked up to Mary and took her hands in his. After a long silence, he stepped back, looking to the floor, and whispered, "Yes, Mary, we share the confusion. If I am an avatar of some otherworldly creature, I can't tell because of the strangeness of how I arrived to this room that leaves me without any answer." Again, I don't know what to tell you about your sad story, but I do have the same question as you do about how I ended up here. The one thing I know is that somebody who is just a voice is leading me to somewhere that has some destiny in mind. The voice is telling us that the purpose of finding the truth and the future is the same voice that has been guiding me on my bizarre journey. Something has taken place, some life-changing event that have visited you, Venus, and myself, and now we are being tested for something that has not revealed itself yet. Mary sat back with her hands folded in her lap, slowly nodding as if he had just arrived at some insight. Martin now turned his eyes to Venus and lowered his voice to a whisper. "Venus, I have never set eyes on you before, so I was puzzled when you asked me if I remember you. You must recall something that I don't, or you do, are having some kind of fantasy about me." Venus stood up and walked nervously around the room. She stopped again and again and tried to say something, but nothing came out of her until she stopped in front of one of the doors and started banging on it with both her fists. At this moment, the voice took over the room and said firmly, "Venus, you're having something difficult to say, and I encourage you to sit down and speak so we can move on." Venus turned around and tore off her blonde wig. A deep male voice bellowed out of her mouth. "Martin, you don't recognize me, but I know you very well. I am Simon, the man you said you loved, and now I'm speaking directly to you after all these years. Please look at me and listen. How can I ever forget how you left me and the tender love that existed between us? Do you remember how we were lovingly drawn to each other? How can I ever forget our magical pillow talks and the explorations of our boundaries? And then, out of nowhere, you just said a short, cold goodbye, closed the door behind you, and you were gone. From joy and love one moment to nothing the next. No letter, no call, no sign of life. Nothing. You left me with a question that has kept me in a prison of why, and why. How could you behave with such cruelty? You must have understood the pain you caused to my life." Venus walked up to Martin, kneeled in front of him, and grabbed both his hands and continued speaking in Simon's deep voice. "Why did you leave me like that, and where did you go? I missed you with all my heart, and now we find each other in this place after all these years. What in heaven's name can be the meaning of us being in this place and time? And what am I supposed to do with the emotions that are coming back to me with the intensity of a tempest?" Martin closed his eyes and sat back and looked up at the ceiling. He stood up and pulled out the chair for Venus and sat down in front of her and spoke. His voice was trembling. "Simon, please understand how confusing it is to speak to a man in the body of a person who claims to be a woman. Equally puzzling is that this relationship took place 20 years ago when we were in our early 40s. Looking at you now, Venus, You cannot be a day older than 30. So the only way to understand this is that we must be in some dimension of warped time. Yes, Simon, I remember you, but I don't recall our experience with the same clarity as you do. And truth be told, I've done my best to forget what took place between us, mainly because of feelings of the guilt that raged inside of me when I woke up from the bliss that we experienced together. The question for me has always been what the consequences would be had I fully embraced my new sexuality. I was convinced that I would have to pay a high price in all my relations if I had revealed myself to the world as a gay man. I made the difficult decision to ignore what my heart was telling me, and instead I let my fear and the confusion take me back to live in my heterosexual life. There, at least, I had a good grasp of how to behave among others, my family, friends, and the society, including a confusing relationship with people in the gay art world. Simon, you're coming back to my life from a distance that can never be bridged because you are locked up in Venus's body. Even if a miracle would be possible, I'm sure that Venus would never allow you to come out and become Simon again. I hope you can understand that I am unable to come back to you because I'm done with that kind of life we had together. In my innermost heart of hearts, I must confess, however, that the sweet memories of what we had together are still with me and will always be with me. Simon, I am really so sorry that I caused you such unbearable pain through my act of leaving you. Now Venus changed her tone, again speaking in her light puberty voice. Martin, your relationship with Simon is also your relationship with me. I wanted to love you as a woman, and I could not bear that we were in a homosexual relationship, when all I wanted was love between you, the man, and me, the woman. Right now, I want to take you in my arms, kiss your lips, and tell you how I'm lusting for you with every fiber in my body. Can you find it in your heart to let go of Simon, because I will never let you have him? I just cannot. Martin stood up and began to nervously walk around the room, stopping at each of the 4 doors, trying to get out. He came back, took his place in front of Venus, held her hands, and said in a subdued voice, Simon and Venus, why are we here struggling with a relationship that ended way back in time? As I experience the intensity of the feelings expressed between us, it seems like that all of this took place just a short time ago. Both of you struggle with how to love me, and both of these relationships are impossible. Simon cannot be released from Venus's body, and for me to respond to Venus' feelings is more than I can bear. Venus, forgive me for turning away your feelings for me, but there is nothing else I can do. After all, we're in a situation which none of us can understand, and there is no telling what is going to happen to us all. Whatever is waiting for us now, we need to find a way to keep together. After Martin had stopped talking, the room again filled with a voice. It is my hope that you are beginning to form an idea, that you come here for a purpose, which each one of you must uncover for yourself, and then share with each other. The sooner you gather enough realization of who you are, you will be tested for the privilege to leave this room. My advice to you is that you all try to find a way to your outer limits and search for truth in places behind the emotional entanglement that you now find yourself in. Martin yelled out, Can you stay with us for a moment and just tell us what is expected of us? Do you have plans for us? I feel that you're playing us like puppets on a string." The voice paused and responded, "You must all find a way to the pregnant emptiness waiting for you. That space can only be found by dissolving the entanglement of your minds. Failure is not acceptable." With this brusque ending, the voice left the room. The older man stood up from his chair, getting ready to say something. The third woman, who had been listening attentively during the exchanges, raised her hand in a gesture that prompted the man to sit down again with a smile on his face. The silence that followed was finally broken as the woman stood up, preparing herself to talk. "My name is Sintra," she said in a hardly audible voice, while moving her eyes from person to person. "I live here, whatever this here is to each one of you. When I came here a long time ago, I had no memory of my parents or my childhood, and no real memories of my adult life. I've been told that the main purpose of my life here is to learn to travel effortlessly in the 3 times. The master of time travel also lives here, and I am her student. Why exactly she has accepted me as her student is hard to understand, since most of my interactions with her take place through my fantasy of her thoughts. Sometimes I have short exchanges with her, and when that happens, she's always sitting behind a curtain out of my sight. She has assured me that it is within my reach to travel both to the vertical past and the horizontal present. Lately, I have gained the ability to be in the present now and travel to the past devoid of distortions. The visits are often short and blurry and rarely sharp and precise, and I'm constantly made aware that I have a long way to mastery. The voice, the one you all have heard, sounds like the same person who has promised to help me to find the right mindset and the skills to master effortless travel through space and time. To my great disappointment, I'm still not able to enter the 10 directions leading to the future. Every time I'm confronted with my shortcomings, I lose my patience and I become angry. When I am angry, the master shows up behind the curtain and starts giggling. When I tell her about my suffering, she leaves without a word and shows me no compassion. Only once she spoke to me about how to enter what she calls a future of no distortion. She said that whatever I thought about entering the future had nothing to do with finding some door or some key, but rather by releasing some subtle obstacles in my mind. All that aside, I have to ask the question why I'm here with the 4 of you at this moment. Perhaps there's a plan for all of us to find truth and enter the future. It seems that I'm part of such a plan. My own goals are clear. I must find and then release the blocks that have been stopping my mission. Listening to you, Martin, during the exchanges with Mary, Simon, and Venus, I understand that you are expressing hurt and disappointment of what life has offered you in spite of your success in the art world. What will happen now has not yet been revealed. The invisible voice has power over us, but perhaps we can agree on some direction where to go from here. The voice is inviting us to come up with some ways forward, and she didn't say that she wanted us to seek the truth or just truth. I can't remember which one. After another pregnant silence, Sintra continued, "Martin, I had many confusing dreams before you arrived here, and you were always in them, appearing in front of me the way I see you now. Many questions came from these dreams. An inner voice inspired me to travel to the Copper Gates for reasons that I couldn't understand at the moment. After I arrived, I found a place to hide, and then I saw you crawling on all four as you came through the opening. As you stood up to face the guardian beast of the secret forest, I realized what brought me to this place. It was as if I had been struck by a thunderbolt when the connection between us was revealed. Martin, I am your mother, the mother who left you in an orphanage when you were just a small boy, unable to understand what was happening to you. Observing you now, I can see that you live the consequences of the vacuum of having lost the only thing that you knew as being one with you, and there is the deepest reason for how you perceive yourself and the world around you. You would never be able to understand the consequences of being abandoned by me unless I tell you my reasons for giving you up to the orphanage. My dear Martin, what I am about to tell you will help you to throw a light on why things in your life have turned out to be the way they are. I can see it all with such amazing clarity, how our lives have been shaped and how these forces have hijacked us in our own peculiar ways. It hurts me to see how you, like a prisoner, are shaking the bars in the darkest places of your mind, convinced that there will never be anybody or anything that you can really trust. Not yourself as an artist, not people who have loved you, and not the motives of people who tell you that you are a genius. You never could explain how you have abandoned many of your relationships for fear that they will abandon you first. Have you been looking at yourself as an empty shell that must remain in hiding to avoid the world around you, to discover your despair? Martin, please listen to me. I am the root cause for this shaky foundation of your life, and here I am now, facing you, filled with fear that you will reject me and hide back in your silence. I am asking you for forgiveness from my heart filled with nothing but love. Can you imagine that I am in the presence of an angel holding a flame that brings a light to a dark room as I am now making my confession in your presence? I have convinced myself that the act of leaving you, this small, adorable child, on the steps to the orphanage would give you the opportunity for a better life than being close to me. You must know that I was a hopeless junkie at the time, unable to take care of myself and of you, a defenseless child already damaged by drugs and alcohol before you even came out of my body. If you cannot forgive me for the pain that I have caused you and what we have done to ourselves and others, then we will never find the way out of this room. Let love be the light that will lead us. That, my dear son, is my prayer and the only way out of this prison of hurt that we are in now. Martin sat in stunned silence, looking at Sintra. The silence was stretched to a place where Sintra thought that he was going to take his revenge by refusing to meet her prayer for forgiveness. But he spoke. Dear Mother Sintra, you speak with a voice so truthful that I see no room to follow my impulse to accuse you of releasing darkness into my world. You did what you could after making a pact with your demon, who was posturing as the sweetness of your addiction. Martin was now crying, his body shaking uncontrollably. Sintra got up and took him in her arms and rocked him gently. Martin continued talking while sobbing. For me, growing up without a mother, in an orphanage with little room for love, was difficult. As I came to my teens, I became aware of the tragedy of not living in a family with loving parents. The search for you has been a dream that has influenced everything else in my life. No matter where I was looking, I ended up with the same question of where I could find my parents. The director and the women at the orphanage denied any knowledge of my biological family, and the social services also claimed that there were no leads for me to follow. All I was told was that a knock on the front door to the orphanage was heard one cold winter night, and a small boy was standing on the stairs crying for his mother. From the torture of not knowing my own background, the artist was eventually born. I had to create the fiction of my life, and this make-believe world of mine was built in partnership with drugs and alcohol, which started in the orphanage when I was about 13. We got hold of glue that we sniffed, and doors opened to a different world. We were often dreaming about our parents, telling each other how one day we would come and take us home. Until now, I never thought about the pain of missing you as the deepest source of my path to making art. One has to marvel at the journey of life and what shapes it, and the price some of us have to pay to keep on living. Sintra, Mother, you're willing to turn the energy of our wounded life into the search for the future, and I want you to know that I accept your invitation. Martin dried his tears and said, Sintra, you need to tell me who my father is. Sintra let go of her embrace, and after a short silence she continued, Martin, I want you to know that you are a loved child. I met your father during a period of my life when I was drug-free. We met on a train in France, and we were instinctively drawn to each other. After a month of getting to know each other, we decided to spend our lives together. When we found out that I was pregnant with you, we celebrated and we were happy. There is so much about you that reminds me of him, the way you look and move, the color of your eyes. Your father was a skilled carpenter, soft-spoken, tall and good-looking, always joyful, with a good sense of humor. You would have been proud of him if you had known him. His name was Salil Duval, born and raised in Casablanca by a Moroccan mother and a French father. The happiness between us did not last. Shortly after the 3rd month of the pregnancy, my best friend died a horrifying death, and I took my deep sadness as an excuse to shoot up heroin, and with that my life was back to the addiction. Your father knew nothing about my drug history, so when he discovered how I was abusing myself and the baby in my stomach, he told me that he had lost all faith in me and in our relationship. He said that he could not see himself spending the rest of his life with me and my addiction. I never heard from him again since that devastating moment when he walked away. Shortly before your birth, I got help and managed to pull myself out of the addiction. I tried to find him, but he left no trace, and I had to give up after months of looking for him. When I couldn't find him, I started to shoot up heroin again. Months before giving birth to you, I had fallen as low as a person could fall. I was shoplifting and prostituting myself to support my addiction. I hated myself because my life had nothing to hold it, and my demons reigned free. It could all have been so different if it hadn't been for my addiction and that one shot of heroin. Martin, we're here now, and we must do the best of the circumstances we're in. After all, I am convinced that we can find a new bond that goes deeper than just sentimentality. We will tear down the rest of the wall standing between us by the power of forgiveness. Sintra and Martin were now sitting next to each other, holding hands and smiling. The man whose voice had earlier been held back by Sintra now stood up and began to walk around the room with his hands folded behind his back and the head held down, contemplating every step. He sat down after some time and looked carefully, taking in each person with undivided attention, and then he started to speak softly. My name is Paulus. Let me first admit that I am confused how I came to this place. It is a strange and inexplicable story. During a trance-like moment, I found myself in a long corridor, facing the wall with a door when the voice instructed me to open the door and enter this room. I found you, Martin, sitting alone as the four of us entered the room. The voice instructed us to deposit the 4 keys in the jewel box and shut the lid, and here I am. Martin, before I continue with my story, I want to tell you that I too have a connection to you. The two of us never met, and yet I feel I know you. For years, I have been fascinated by the way you explore the challenges of life through your art. I have been using your work to start conversations in my mind-body awareness classes, and your art journey has helped me explore my own inner self. Your mirror labyrinth asks the questions of the existence of parallel universes. The light streaming from the unknown has been haunting you in your search for truth. We must all let you inspire us to find the future through the lens of making and appreciating art. Is it possible that we together can shape new metaphors for our understanding of where we want to go from here? Can we rid ourselves of the resentment, the hurt, the anger, and be creative enough to imagine these feelings when we need them in service of creation, and dissolve them by our own willpower when they are no longer of any use to us? Martin, we all share the fear and confusion of entering the unknown, but we must go there simply because there is no other way. Now let me tell you about my incredible journey of coming here. It all started when I was invited to speak at the Body-Mind conference in Japan. Somewhere above the middle of the Pacific Ocean, between Los Angeles and Osaka, the plane started to shake so hard that I was convinced that it would break into pieces. Some people were screaming, others were praying. The man sitting next to me grabbed my clothes and cried for his mother. I must have fainted because when I woke up, I inexplicably found myself tied up, hands and feet, behind a wall of great height with barbed wire on either side of me. I woke up to a moment that was more real than anything I had experienced before. Everything was so strangely defined, sharp and rich in sound, color, and appearance. The same female voice who instructed me to enter this room urged me to conquer the wall. How this would happen was my responsibility, and I was told that I could expect no further help from her. I untangled the ropes which at first seemed next to impossible, but I managed to loosen the knots after days and nights of struggle. After having liberated myself from the ropes, I was physically and mentally exhausted. A luminous creature, a woman in flowing white dress, appeared in a dream. She told me that she would help me to conquer the wall by removing the obstacle standing in front of me. She urged me to give up the idea to physically climb over the wall and to look for another way to continue my journey. She insisted that I look in the space with my mind wide open, ready for something that I had never seen or imagined before. She said that the real truth was that the wall was an illusion. She somehow transmitted her realization to me, and that very moment I knew that I had been living in a world that was constructed by habits and opinions, and now the illusion was mercilessly revealed. Nothing had substantial existence, and everything was dissolved into empty space. It was so beautiful and so true and so real, free from any kind of conception. I saw all existence as one huge breathing organism, and I realized that it was within my reach to dissolve all concepts, including the solid wall. No words will describe what my mind was perceiving. There was no wall and there was no rope, and yet they were there, sharply for my eyes to see. Nothing was now stopping me from moving around in all directions without any effort. And then I simply walked through the wall as if it was made out of thin air. There are no words to describe the experience of freedom and the joy that I experienced. The very moment after having passed through the wall, I escaped back to the order that had guided me to a life of success and fame. I was unable to hold on to the moment of bliss, and it sadly slipped away. The victory over the elements, this short visit to the naked truth, will not leave my mind, and neither can my reasons for falling back to what had defined me and my personal and professional life. My chances, our chances, will die if we don't rid ourselves from the absorption of who we think we are. Everything is related in a cosmic dance, and we are simply a small part of that dance. Paulus looked around, took a deep breath, and then he continued. And now we're here, trying to find what is next for us, for me. The future is on its way, but what is the future, I wonder? Does the future really exist? What I saw standing in front of that unsurmountable wall in that brief moment of absolute freedom must be the destiny of our aspirations. We may go our own ways once the journey is clear to each of us, but we will need each other to gather the courage to break out of the dream we're in now. One thing I hope we can agree on is to engage the voice to reveal her plan before we can move ahead to wherever we must go. We must ask her to clarify the balance between conforming to her plan and us making our own choices. We need to understand what obstacles are piled up against us, and we must talk about how we can remove them to clear the way to the truth that Paulus has seen. Can I be trusted by you all to share my hope for the future and guide you with the help of Sintra's insight into travel across time and space, to the past and into the future? Is the shaman of the past, present, and the future who is helping Sintra, and the voice the same? And how can we ask for support in clearing out all that prevents us from where we must go from here? I believe that we must begin by loving each other without conditions, and that must be the foundation for everything else. There is really nothing sentimental in that love that I'm talking about, and I trust that we can find the understanding and the motivation to go ahead. Mary, who had been sitting in isolation, now signaled to speak, and she said, "After listening to Paulus and tuning into the feelings between us, I am beginning to realize that I will be the drag for the group to move on. What I have done to myself and the pain I have caused those around me surrounds me like a fog in which I am hopelessly lost. I allowed somebody else to shape my identity, when in fact it was my responsibility to shape myself into someone I could live with. I gave away all power except the one that comes from being a victim. I found the wrong way to escape my pain when I struck my head in the oven. I ignored the sacred life, leaving it to others to find what was for me to find, and now I must pay the price for my error. I see this all with such clarity now. Please, if you together manage to find the way out of this room, I urge you to leave me here. I will not accept to stand in your way, no matter what awaits me in this house of sorrows." Venus looked at Mary with sad eyes and said, "Mary, it is true that your life has been a long and unbearable suffering, and I for one can identify with you in your struggle to escape the pain because your sadistic husband. Simon's presence in my body has been driving me to such despair that I have been contemplating to take my life just to kill Simon, with the hope that I will wake up with only the body and mind of Venus remaining. We both have been walking down the path of self-destruction. There must be forgiveness for both of us, and I will not leave on a journey without you. Dear Mary, it is so sad that you could not see the beauty in your own life, how you reduced yourself to something that had no worth to you. Mary, you are here to give a new birth to yourself and not to decide to stay the same. And you have already started. You're looking at yourself from the bottom of despair, and you're beginning to recognize the sacredness of your life through offering compassion to the rest of us. Mary, it's time for you to wake up." The short silence was followed by the voice. It is true that Mary put her head in the oven with the intention to end a sacred life given as a gift from the universe. That would bring you a hard sentence because it will make you guilty of murder. Just because you have lived with the false idea that you are a separate self with the right to take your life does not mean that you or anybody else have the right to end your life, as little as it was only your choice to come into life through the union of your parents. Mary, because of your heartfelt offer to stay behind for the benefit of everyone else here, you have found the key to unlock the consequences of your actions, and therefore I am asking you to dedicate yourself to help the group by using your compassionate self. Continue to turn your resentment into kindness and reveal the way for the benefit of the people in this room. Keep your strong intention to fill the room with love that does not ask for anything in return. Unite the forces of skills and wisdom. Mary was seated at the table with her eyes closed as she was listening to the voice. A gray, smoky shadow slowly lifted from her body and dissolved into space without leaving a trace. Everybody was watching in amazement as Mary stood up and looked smilingly into everybody's eyes. Gone was the posture of downtrodden woman, now replaced by a peaceful glow shining from within. At this moment, the room started to shake with a loud rumble coming from below. The floor was moving, waves like shiny mercury. The walls were undulating as they had been made out of flowing silk. A series of loud thunderclaps ripped open cracks in one of the walls, revealing a sharp light that now filled the room. When the shaking stopped, all except Mary were lying on the floor waiting for the horrifying end. Mary stood tall and fearless, radiating a glowing smile. One by one, the four of them stood up as the fear gave room for curiosity, looking at each other, revealing questions in search for answers. Sintra broke the stillness. The earthquake was truly a horrifying moment, she said. The relief to see you all unharmed makes me believe that we are being welded together by manifesting unity and providing protection from danger. By looking at Mary, I realize that fear and anger cannot be used as protection when crossing the borders of time and space. We need to find out what other reasons exist for being here. I'm trying to understand what the voice just said and the change that just come over Mary. We must leave this room, but what will be the conditions that will help us to move towards our destiny? Martin took the word. Listening to Sintra, I am impressed how every word, every gesture, every pause radiates a true expression of your soul. You and Mary make me see that my life has been a fabrication for the benefit of the person whom I have invented to be me. The art world has made me into some kind of false godlike figure, different from my own low opinion of myself. My retreat into silence has always been a manipulation meant to increase the illusionary image of the sacred artist. To even think that is dishonest and narcissistic. What I have achieved with most of my art projects is to add confusion and erotic dissonance to so many people instead of offering help and life-serving discovery. Is that not a sad thing to have to say? Truth be told, the way I have constructed my life is nothing but the way of hiding from loneliness and despair. Can you imagine what an awful way to live your life? I have never before allowed anybody to hear this confession, but I am glad to talk because I'm done with lying to myself and others. My prison has followed me in my dreams, tearing at my soul with no escape other than silent withdrawal, drugs, and phony talk. Venus, right now I'm turning to you because we both share the profound sense of living with an inner battle of identity that brings us nothing but misery. Can we give each other courage to distance ourselves from our misery and find another way of making meaning for the precious life? Speaking for me, this is the time to cast away the falsehood and find something that I can stand on without the numbing fear of being found out as the imposter that I have become. You're right, Sintra. The journey cannot continue using fear as a shield when we cross the boundary. We must find the way towards the light that just revealed itself to us through the cracks in the walls. Venus, now taken by the moment, made several attempts to speak and said, Martin, what you just said helps me to face myself in a new way. I hesitate to say this, but I also realize that I'm not worthy to go on from here because there is no true self to be found in the battle between Simon and Venus. It's just so confusing, even though I'm trying so hard to let the man in me exist in peace with the woman I feel I must become. I cannot go back to being Simon, and I fear that I will never become the woman of my dreams. Maybe I have the wrong idea what it is to be a female. Perhaps the root of all my confusion is resting on top of a huge misunderstanding. Look at me, a travesty, a vulgar woman trying to convince herself and the world that Venus exists in the pure female form, able to seduce the world to worship her. Martin, I need your approval, both as Venus and as Simon, and you must acknowledge that you understand our need for your love. Sadly, the need is so strong that it is blocking the way forward, and I don't know what to do now. Please just leave me here. Do not let my obsession block the journey to the future for the rest of you. That is my wish. Now everybody was sitting in silence, contemplating the heartfelt wish that Venus made when the voice came back. Venus, it's true that you and Simon are stuck in the prison of your desire. It's good that you can see this predicament without any false explanations. Let me suggest a way out of the impasse. Imagine a triangle between yourself, Simon, and Martin. I'm urging the three of you to join in an effort to make this triangle perfectly symmetrical. Then find the exact point in the epicenter of the triangle where you will find a secret energy with the power to liberate you from your sufferings. Mary, now please go to the box, take out the 4 keys, each with a different color. Take the blue key for yourself and keep it near your heart. When the time is right, I will tell you about the other 3 keys. Martin realized that the escape that was offered by the voice was a prescription for entering another world. This was a chance to create the perfect art piece, using mental energy to fuse male and female energy and let pure art be born without the aim to neither reject or please. Martin stood up and spoke in a low voice. Venus and Simon, I am convinced that the creation of freedom through the celebration of the vastness of the human mind is within reach. Let us be part of the miracle that can only happen with the 3 of us creating a mental energy that makes speech unnecessary. As for the creation of the triangle, the 2 of us must invite Simon to represent the 3rd leg of the triangle. He must come to us through the power of our minds and manifest in his physical body. I don't know why I am so sure that it is within our reach to bring him back to our realm. We can, if we can dissolve all the pain and the hurt. Again the voice broke into Martin's preparation and spoke slowly. Let me help you. Sit down eye to eye in silence. The voice broke into Martin's preparation and spoke slowly. Let me help you. Sit down eye to eye in silence. Relax and let your eyes merge in the middle of the space between the 2 of you. Bring to mind the smiling image of Simon and nod to each other when you see him physically in your presence. This will be the time to start the construction of the triangle. It is important that each leg of the triangle has exactly the same length. When each of you have the image of the perfect symmetrical figure, then agree with each other without talking. Within this triangle, you will find 9 intersecting triangles, which will give you the center of the larger triangle. From there, draw a vertical line, making the form and the height of a triangular pyramid. Take your time to bring your mind to rest in the center of the triangle and mentally move to the top of the pyramid from behind closed eyes. When the 3 of you have arrived there will be an opening for you to enter. Before starting the construction of the pyramid, Mary will give you the red, white, and yellow keys that were once used to open the doors to the room you're in now. Martin stood up, inspired by the voice. He placed another chair in front of him for Venus to sit. Holding Venus' hands in his, Martin smiled and said, "Venus, before beginning to construct the triangle, let us dissolve the hurt for things that we've said and done to each other. Simon and Venus, once more, I speak directly to your hearts to forgive me. Simon, like a mindless child, I left you with little knowledge of the human heart. I know better now. Dear Venus, let us be present as we look into each other's eyes, and from there we will find the precise point in the middle of our gaze. From this point, we will manifest Simon to form the third leg of the triangle." Mary stood up and handed the red key to Martin, the yellow key to Venus, and said, "Venus, I'm also giving you the white key, which you will give to Simon as a gift and a prayer from your heart. Pray with conviction that he will separate himself from you and let you be free to live in the poetry of your feminine dream. When your prayer is heard, Simon will be let out of the prison you have built for him, free to find his own life." After sinking into each other's minds, Venus and Martin nodded, thereby affirming that Simon had manifested and the perfect symmetrical form of the triangle was a reality. The search continued for the center of the triangle, and without the help of any thought or concept, the precise point was discovered through pure mental agreement. Sintra, Mary, and Paulus were holding their breaths while watching the charged silence as the visualization was taking place. In amazement, the three of them witnessed how Simon manifested, handsome and youthful, sitting calmly with his eyes closed at the point which formed the third leg of the triangle. When the vertical line was drawn, the walls of the pyramids closed, and nothing of what took place inside could be observed from the outside. The top of the structure opened and violently collapsed, producing a multicolored bright light and a thundering sound reminiscent of stampeding horses. Sintra, Mary, and Paulus instinctively lay down flat on the floor to protect themselves from the intense light and the frightening sounds. A howling whirlwind appeared briefly over the remains of the pyramid, and when the sound stopped, no trace of the pyramid could be found. On the floor was the white, red, and yellow keys laid out in a neat row. A luminous butterfly was flapping above the keys and then found its way out through a crack in the wall. In the stunned silence that followed, Sintra started to cry softly while holding her face in her hands. "What just happened here?" she said. "Where did Venus and Martin just go? How come a butterfly came to fly in the space of the vanished pyramid? Was that Martin saying farewell? My heart aches with fear that I will never see him again. You all know how much Martin and I had to say to each other, and we must be given a chance to continue to explore what is possible between us. How can we join them wherever they are now? Can it be that they will come back to us and show us the way, or are we now left here with no way out?" Mary went over to Sintra and put her arms around her, slowly rocking her back and forth as she spoke. "Dear Sintra, I'm confident that we will find the chance to join Martin, Venus, and Simon. They must have used the keys for a purpose and then left them for us to use. With your kind wishes I think we can find a way to release the power contained in this luminous blue key that is now sending warm waves to my heart. We are on our way out of this room, and somehow we will enter the world where Martin, Venus, and Simons are dwelling, and if we end up somewhere else, they will always be in our hearts. Let us celebrate the magic that we witnessed. They tamed their minds, and they came to the top of the pyramid where they left without a trace. This could not have happened if they didn't know that the universe was waiting to welcome them. Now we need to find the ways to use the keys. We used them to enter this room, and now we must use them to find the way out. Time now for us to wake up from the illusion and have the courage to search for liberation without knowing in advance what liberation is or what the so-called future is. We saw how Martin, Venus, and Simon were able to find the vibration that was created in the physical space between them, not knowing their destination, but with open hearts and minds. They trusted that the moment would bring them to the realm of peace. With my inspiration from the voice, with Sintra's training in traveling back to the past and moving anywhere in the present time, with Paula's experience to walk through the massive wall, without effort, we should be able to navigate the way forward. Sintra continued to sob and said, "Mary, your words are soothing me, and I'm convinced that you have been given the power to lead us, but you must understand that I have a strong desire to reunite with Martin. I find it perverse that the longing for my son can stand in the way from being liberated from the prison we're in now. And why are we left here, having just witnessed the disappearance of Martin, Venus, and Simon to the top of the pyramid? We do not know where they are now, but the three of them were liberated for reasons that we can only speculate about. Why did Martin not invite me instead of taking Simon along? I am his mother." Paulus' shoulders fell down and his face was overcome with sadness. "Dear Sintra, I don't know how to handle your loss. How can I be with your sadness, with every fiber of my body, and at the same time not let your longing for Martin take such a hold on me that I am unable to focus on seeking freedom?" The voice was suddenly back, bouncing between the walls, now with a metallic ring to it. She uttered one short sentence. "Maybe you should agree about what the future really is. How does it exist? Could it be that the future is just one more illusion?" Sintra was waiting for the voice to explain her question. When no explanation was offered, she decided to respond. "The future exists in my imagination as a dream. I see myself wandering through a flowering meadow as a soft summer breeze speaks to my soul. I make an effortless dive into the very center of life. I experience my body so liberated that I can dance in the sky. That is the dream that I can taste in fleeting moments, but I just don't know how to bring myself to live in this beautiful dream. I know our past choices in life is the reason why we are in this place now, even if our memories have been made to fit our dreams of how we want to be in the world. Can it be that these keys left for us are not leading to what we have nominated to be the future, but to another dimension that we have yet to discover? Maybe the voice has found the right question. I now think that the future will always be just one more illusion. Mary moved slowly towards the two keys on the floor while seeking the eyes of Sintra and Paulus. She looked as if she was debating with herself to what to do next. After having walked 3 times around the place of the vanished pyramid, she whispered, "I am sorry that I cannot bring myself to hand out the keys because Sintra is distracted by the hope that the key will open the door to Martin? Are you clinging to the dream of being the mother you couldn't be? Can you look at the situation through acceptance of where you are right now, pure and simple? I'm hoping that Martin, the man who transformed into luminous light, will have the power to liberate you with his loving spirit, which was left as a clear presence in the room. Please bring that spirit into your heart and rejoice with that. Paulus was holding his head in his hand, still unable to clear his mind from being in the grips of Sintra's tragedy. He was convinced that getting out of this room would depend on courage to dissolve thoughts of such complexity that was keeping him and Sintra stuck. When he looked at Mary, Paulus realized that the way to joyful existence was within reach, and Mary was showing the way with her stainless mind. Paulus spoke and reflected on each word before it came over his lips. I realize that we have all been talking about the future, filling it with dreams and desires. We're also forming a common view that the way out is waiting to be revealed by us. The majestic walls of this room made escape seem impossible, until we witnessed the opening of luminous cracks in one of these walls and the departure of Martin, Venus, and Simon. Mary is telling us that her blue key that is resting about her heart is sending waves to her with some message that we will come to understand when Mary decides to hand the 2 remaining keys to Sintra and me. Bringing myself back to the moment when I walked effortlessly through the wall, there and then I found myself as being one with the universal love, pulsating between the past and the future and attached to neither one of them. What if we together can manifest unconditional love and generosity? What if it is within our wisdom to create the circumstances that will allow them to guide us? They made forgiveness to be the base of the pyramid, and I believe that this was the real reason why they could communicate by mingling their minds to be something more than any of them could have achieved alone. We must find the courage to forgive ourselves and each other for every foolish act and every unkind word, and let the open space be filled with happiness. That is what they did, and that is what we must do. When Paulus spoke these words, Sintra reached out and took the hands of Mary and Paulus. Please, I'm ready to receive the key, and I know what I must do now. I'm crying for joy, knowing that the keys are meant for our hearts and minds and have nothing to do with what most people think that keys are made for. Martin is nesting in my heart just the way he is remembered, and that is all that matters. In the silence followed Sintra's realization, the voice came back, now speaking softly. You are inspired by the disappearance of Martin, Venus, and Simon. I'm glad that you were there to witness when it happened. You're closer to them than you can imagine, so time now to set up on your journey. What you saw will help you to open the doors to the stillness of the mind. Time to let go of me as a part of I. Mary, this is the moment to hand out the keys, the red key to Paulus and the white key to Sintra. Paulus spoke up and asked the voice, do the colors lead to a different destiny? Are we going to stay together? Instead, Mary responded and said that the voice had whispered to her how the keys were going to be used. The blue key, her key, had the power to remove subtle obstacles that could make the journey difficult. How the key would be used, the voice did not reveal, since that could only be understood through Mary's own experience in the moment. The voice had also told her that Paulus was given the red key to increase his ability to separate falsehood from truth. Sintra was given the white key, which would give her the ability to set the first direction forward. Mary also said that it was necessary to continue together on the path, but the experience would be a personal matter. What that means, said Mary, is that we will be helping each other to go forward, but there is no meaning in us sharing the understanding of the experience itself, since such an explanation would not be understandable to anyone. It's time now to cross over to the other shore, the land of freedom and joy, where the pain of the past and images of the future have no place. When you have crossed the river, there is no need for you to carry the boat on your back when you resume the journey. That was the last word heard from the voice. After Mary's speech, the three of them were sitting in silence. The wall continued to widen, now producing sounds of a soft wind as the light filled the room and made each of them glow. The wall continued to open. Negative emotions melted away like snowflakes on a sunny flower meadow. Mary whispered into the breeze, "Let us journey to inner space, shedding the notion of me and mine." The wall continued to melt away, leaving a stunning view. Sintra stood up and walked to the place where the floor met the light. Mary and Paulus walked up to stand at her side. Sintra held her white key high above her and said, "We have climbed to the top of this illusionary mountain of the ego and committed to release the me and mine into emptiness. We are about to take the step into space with courage and confidence. Now is the time to shed fear, just as we must abandon any hope of where we will end up. The space in front of us holds the universe together for the benefit of all that exists. We can now take this step, but first let us still our minds and send a prayer to the universe to help all those coming after us to find happiness and discover the place from where happiness comes." The moment was still as they fixed a gaze into the misty, luminous abyss, and then they took the step. There was this soft, swirly movement. No up, down, or sideways could be found. Jubilant joy settled in their minds, but no me and mine was there to enjoy it. They smiled as the stains in their hearts and the ghosts of their minds dissolved to freedom, conscious of each other, preparing for the journey. We have now come to the end of the Kappa Gates and to the beginning of the second book that take place in the south of India in a town called Bhuvanar. I'm still not finished writing it, but you will be the first to know when it will be available for you to listen to. I will now read a few pages to give you a taste of what is to come. Bhuvanar. Like every other morning, Arun was getting up early. After his yoga session, he sat down with a cup of tea and turned his attention to the dense jungle surrounding him. He invited the sounds from birds, amphibians, and insects to please his ears as he watched the cool Indian morning open up like a flower. He closed his eyes and let the fragrant breeze caress him. From the temple behind the jungle, the merry chanting and the sounding of drums were sending prayers to protect life and peace. A group of women dressed in bright, colorful saris passed by on the garden path with straight backs and heads held high. Life was a gift full of purpose and joy. Arun was home. At a moment like this, it was hard to imagine that several apocalyptic threats were approaching Bhuvanar, each with its own frightening speed.